What if I told you R-Truth didn't just leave WWE? He escaped it? He wasn't just cut. He was silenced. Not by a contract. Not by a clause. But by a machine that knows how to erase names without saying a word. But before we continue, let us know your best R-Truth moment in the comments below. Let's get something straight, WWE has fired hundreds of wrestlers over the years. Most leave quietly. Some rage on podcasts. Some crawl back. Others vanish entirely. But R-Truth? His exit wasn't loud. It was silent, and that's exactly why it hit different. This is a man who gave 2 decades to WWE. A man who danced, joked, got pinned, got back up, and smiled while doing it. A man who made gold out of garbage, literally, with the 24/7 title. And then? Gone. No farewell. No thank you video. No emotional goodbye like Edge or Ray or Cena. Just radio silence. And then the whispers started. Whispers that Triple H was furious. That R-Truth turned down one last offer. That his merch was yanked. His name blacklisted. That Triple H, who built his own second chance with DX, with NXT, with power, couldn't stomach the idea of R-Truth walking away on his own terms. And now? Some say Triple H slammed R-Truth behind closed doors. Others say he won't even speak his name. But here's the most outrageous part. R-Truth may be getting punished for leaving a company that had already cut him loose. Let that sink in. He didn't jump ship to AEW right away. He didn't trash the company. He just walked out, and took his silence with him. And in WWE? That's not loyalty. That's betrayal. So, what really happened? Why would a respected veteran like R-Truth refuse Triple H's final offer? What kind of backstage fallout could trigger a complete blackout on a guy fans universally love? And why is the WWE machine pretending he never existed, when he helped carry it through some of its worst creative years? Because here's the truth, this isn't just a wrestling story. This is a story about loyalty. About control. About what happens when someone chooses dignity over obedience. Let's not sugarcoat it. WWE didn't just lose R-Truth. They lost the one guy who never complained, never walked out, never asked for a push, and still managed to steal the show. And now, there's a new chapter. A new ring. A new crowd. And possibly, a new rebellion. Because if the rumors are true, and R-Truth is heading to AEW, then we're looking at one of the most symbolic exits in modern wrestling. Not for titles. Not for fame. But for freedom. In the next hour, we're going deep, the final conversation between R-Truth and Triple H. The banned merchandise. The backstage politics WWE doesn't want to admit. And the burning question, why would WWE try to erase a man they once used to hold it all together? So, whether you're a lifelong fan, a casual watcher, or someone who's just here for the drama, strap in. Because this is what happens when the company man stops playing the clown, and starts rewriting his own legacy. This is the real story WWE didn't want you to hear. This is R-Truth's final chapter. And maybe his boldest one yet. The day R-Truth disappeared from WWE wasn't marked by an emotional farewell or a viral promo. No headlines. No breaking news. No thank you, Truth chants echoing through the arena. Just a quiet vanishing act, like a character written out of the show mid-season with no explanation. For a man who had been with the company, off and on, for over 20 years, the lack of a send-off was more than strange. It was unnatural. Because if anyone had earned a goodbye, it was R-Truth. Here's what's even stranger, nobody inside WWE wanted to talk about it. Production members stopped mentioning his name. Segments where he would have naturally been included suddenly featured new faces. His image was removed from future marketing materials. Even in a business where people get cut regularly, this felt cold. But let's rewind. Because to understand why this firing shocked so many, you need to understand who R-Truth really was within WWE. He was the ultimate utility player. A performer who could open the show, kill a dead crowd, entertain during a commercial break, and go viral for the company all in the same night. Most fans knew him for his comedy. His clueless persona, the invisible opponent bits, the chaotic 24/7 title chases, but backstage, his reputation was gold. He showed up early. He worked with younger talent. He never complained. When WWE needed someone to carry a forgettable segment or save a dying gimmick, Truth was the guy. He didn't care about titles. He didn't beg for pushes. He showed up, did the job, and made you laugh doing it. Which is why his firing didn't just surprise people, it made them uncomfortable. No one saw it coming. Not because wrestlers can't get released, but because R-Truth had been seen as safe. Too funny to fire. Too reliable to bench. In a company that constantly boasts about family and loyalty, R-Truth seemed like the kind of guy who'd always have a spot. Then the rumors started. There was no budget cut statement. No press release. No goodbye social media post from WWE. Just sudden absence. When fans began to notice he hadn't been on TV in months, some thought he was injured. Others assumed he was filming something. But insiders knew something else, he was gone. The timing was odd too. Triple H had taken creative control after Vince McMahon's scandalous exit and brief return. Morale was reportedly better. Some released talents were brought back. But while others were getting fresh starts, R-Truth quietly faded into the background. It's easy to assume Truth had simply run out of value. He wasn't winning matches. He wasn't in title pictures. He was 50 years old. Maybe WWE just didn't have anything left for him. But that theory doesn't hold up. Because Truth was still connecting with audiences. Still getting laughs. Still moving merch. Still generating social clips. In a business obsessed with engagement, he was still doing his job better than half the roster. So, what gives? What if it wasn't just about value? What if it was about control? Here's where it gets interesting. Sources close to the situation say R-Truth didn't just get fired, he walked away. The version of the story whispered backstage is that Truth was offered a role. Not as a top guy, not even as a mid-card regular. Just a background figure. A guy for comedy bits and backstage skits. And he said no. That rejection, according to some, didn't sit well with Triple H. Remember, this wasn't the first time Truth was underused. He'd spent years as a comic act, often stuck in ridiculous storylines. But he always took it on the chin. He played along. He danced when they told him to. He ran through catering halls with the 24/7 title like it actually meant something. He made chicken salad out of chicken scraps every week. But this time? He refused the bowl. It's hard to overstate how rare that is in WWE. Most veterans, especially ones not in the main event, accept what they're given. They'd rather stay under contract than risk free agency. But R-Truth, of all people, did the unthinkable. He passed on the safety net. Now, imagine you're Triple H. You offer one of the longest-standing locker room figures a new role, an easy paycheck, less bumping, maybe even some creative input. And instead of gratitude, you get a no. That's not just rejection. In the eyes of WWE leadership, that's defiance. That may have been the moment things shifted. In companies where control is everything, rejection isn't tolerated. The offer isn't just a job, it's a test. Say yes, and you're still part of the system. Say no, and you're out, completely. Insiders say this is where the blacklisting began. Mentions of R-Truth on screen were scrubbed. His merchandise quietly disappeared from online shops. Planned segments that might have referenced him were rewritten. And WWE did what it always does when someone leaves the wrong way. It acted like he was never there. No tribute package. No interview. No thank you tweet. Silence. And if you know anything about WWE history, that silence means something. It means you didn't just leave, you disobeyed. You didn't just exit, you walked out without permission. Let's talk about the fans. When news started to circulate online that R-Truth was gone, the response wasn't just sadness. It was confusion. Anger. Disbelief. This was a man who never caused trouble. Never politicized. Never went on a shoot podcast to trash the company. He just showed up and did what was asked, better than anyone. So why was his exit treated like a betrayal? Because WWE doesn't always punish what you do. Sometimes, it punishes what you don't do. R-Truth didn't take the deal. He didn't play along. He didn't stay in the box. And in WWE, that's enough. In a few short weeks, the man who had once held the 24/7 title more than 50 times became invisible. Not because fans forgot him, but because WWE chose to erase him. But the fans didn't move on. They started to ask questions. And the deeper you look, the more those questions pile up. Why would TripleH, a man known for rebuilding fallen talent in NXT, not give R-Truth a meaningful farewell? Why didn't any of his colleagues speak out? Why was his name suddenly off the board like he'd never existed? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're warnings. About what happens when your value is based solely on compliance, not contribution. About what loyalty really means in a business that claims to honor it, but only when it's convenient. The firing of R-Truth wasn't loud. That's what makes it so important. Because in a company where drama sells, where returns are hyped for weeks, and exits are milked for sympathy, R-Truth didn't get a moment. He got erased. And the scariest part? That might have been the plan all along. There's a story that's circulated among a few backstage veterans. It's not confirmed. It's not official. But it spreads the way most real stories in wrestling do: whispers in locker rooms, nods at the bar, quiet texts between people who know how this business really works. The story goes like this: when R-Truth turned down Triple H's final offer, Hunter didn't just move on. He exploded. Not in a public tirade. Not in a boardroom speech. But in private. Reportedly slamming his fist into the desk. Allegedly throwing his headset. Rumors even say a production monitor got the worst of it. Now, was it a literal slam? Or the kind of slam that happens in a closed-door meeting when someone's name comes up and the response is a flat, "We're done with him"? In WWE, it doesn't matter. Because either version ends the same way, the message goes out that R-Truth is no longer to be mentioned. Not in creative. Not in interviews. Not in anything. You see, WWE doesn't fire people like a normal company. It absorbs them. And when it can't, when someone walks away on their own, it punishes them differently. Quietly. Completely. That's where Truth found himself, on the wrong side of silence. He didn't blast the company in a podcast. He didn't threaten legal action. He didn't even tease an AEW jump at first. All he did was say no. And in WWE, that's enough. But this isn't new. It's just the latest version of an old pattern. Ask around about others who vanished. Naomi. Sasha. CM Punk before the AEW return. When WWE doesn't like how someone leaves, they don't retaliate with statements. They retaliate with erasure. They stop acknowledging your existence. They pull your merch. They strip your segments from replays. They pretend you were never a factor, no matter how much you meant to the company. R-Truth's case was even colder. Here's a man who had helped carry WWE's worst creative eras on his back. Who turned nonsense into moments. Who took the 24/7 title, one of WWE's most mocked gimmicks, and made it viral. He made it work. Every week. 4 years. And yet, the moment he refused to accept his final role, they cut him from everything. Sources say this went beyond creative. This was personal. Triple H, while seen by many as more talent-friendly than Vince, is known for being direct and deeply territorial. When someone from his system pushes back, he notices. When someone outside the system refuses to comply, he remembers. R-Truth was never part of the NXT machine. He didn't owe his comeback to Triple H. He owed it to himself. To charisma. To longevity. To the crowd. That independence might have been part of the problem. Because for all the changes Triple H made when he took over, more wrestling, fewer rematches, longer-term stories, there was one thing that didn't change: control. In WWE, when you're offered something and decline it, it's not just a missed opportunity. It's insubordination. Which brings us to the backstage response. According to multiple reports, R-Truth's name was immediately removed from active creative planning. Planned jokes, callbacks, even mentions in scripts were taken out. In production meetings, his name stopped being spoken. People close to creative noticed the shift. One insider allegedly said, "It was like we were told he died. Just no mention. Nothing." And then came the merch bans. R-Truth's shirts stopped appearing in the online shop. Fans who tried to buy older designs saw page not found. Staff at live events reported being told not to wear anything with his branding. Even superstars were discouraged from wearing his gear to training or promo shoots. No explanation. No public statement. Just a vanishing act. This isn't just business. It's optics. WWE doesn't want fans to ask questions. If they quietly delete you, fewer people notice you're missing. But in Truth's case, that strategy backfired. Because fans did notice. They remembered how he made them laugh during the pandemic when crowds were gone and morale was low. They remembered how he sold out shirts by accident with a fake John Cena heel turn promo. They remembered how he stood in that ring and made anything feel important. The fans asked, "Where's R-Truth?" And WWE said nothing. Which brings us back to Triple H. If the rumors are true, and he did react with anger, if the slam happened, then this wasn't just about business. It was about pride. About someone saying no when he expected a yes. Triple H, the wrestler, was all about rebellion. But Triple H, the executive, understands branding. R-Truth leaving quietly wasn't part of the narrative. He didn't get to be the guy who walked away. He was supposed to be the guy who stayed loyal until the very end, until the company said we're done. But Truth flipped that. He left before they could define the ending. And for a company obsessed with writing everyone's final chapter, that's unacceptable. So, they rewrote it themselves. They wrote him out. Not with a burial. Not with a jobber match. But with the worst punishment WWE hands out: silence. No farewell. No burial. Just erasure. Think about how many superstars got more dramatic exits. Baron Corbin was humiliated for weeks as Bum-Ass Corbin. Nia Jax had public heat and still got a send-off match. Even Goldberg, who many fans openly booed, got a retirement tour. But Truth? Nothing. Because the story WWE didn't want to tell was this: one of its most loyal, long-serving performers decided his dignity was worth more than another paycheck. That kind of story isn't marketable. It's dangerous. It tells others that you can walk away. That you don't have to wait to be released. That you don't have to be part of the machine to be remembered. So, WWE buried the story before it could spread. But they forgot one thing: you can't bury charisma. R-Truth was never just a WWE guy. He was a fan favorite. A locker room legend. A meme machine. And now, his absence says more than any promo ever could. What happened behind closed doors wasn't just a tantrum or a missed opportunity. It was a reminder of how WWE handles rejection. Not with dialogue. Not with transparency. But with deletion. The company that claims to build stars is also very good at pretending they never existed. Especially when those stars don't stick to the script. R-Truth didn't follow the script. He didn't take the deal. He didn't accept the box they built for him. And so, they slammed the door shut. Not with words. Not with storylines. But with silence. On the surface, it looks simple. WWE offers a veteran talent a contract extension. He says no. Happens all the time, right? But when it's R-Truth, it's different. Because this wasn't just a no, it was a quiet revolution. Let's be clear. This wasn't about money. WWE doesn't pinch pennies with veterans they can still use, especially ones with crossover appeal. R-Truth still had TV presence, social media buzz, and a solid fan base. He was a brand inside the brand. So, if it wasn't about cash, what was it about? Control. Identity. And maybe, finally, self-respect. Let's go back. R-Truth, real name Ron Killings, wasn't some overnight success story. His path was rocky from day one. He broke into the business the hard way. Independent promotions. Tough crowds. No backing. No name. He got his first WWE shot as K-Quick in the early 2000s. The run was forgettable. He left. Went to TNA. Became the first black NWA World Heavyweight Champion in decades. Reinvented himself. Became undeniable. And when he came back to WWE in 2008, it wasn't because they believed in him, it was because he forced them to. But even then, he was rarely seen as a top guy. He was the comic relief. The fun veteran. The guy who could lose with a smile. His one big main event push, against John Cena in 2011, lasted less than a summer. After that, he was right back in the mid-card. The punchline. The distraction. And yet, he stayed. 4 years. Why? Because R-Truth understood the business. He knew the power of consistency. Of always being useful. He knew that WWE needs lifers. People who keep the ship afloat while others are trying to be the face of the company. He was the glue. The bridge between eras. He was there when The Rock returned. He was there through the Cena years, the Shield era, the brand split, the pandemic, the 24/7 era. Always reliable. Always ready. Always funny. But being funny comes with a price. Over time, R-Truth became the default joke. Need to kill time in a segment? Throw in R-Truth. Need to break tension in a backstage skit? Cue the R-Truth line. Want to get a cheap laugh from the crowd? Let him say something ridiculous. He was brilliant at it. But behind the laughs, there was a ceiling. And maybe, after years of being stuck under that ceiling, he realized it wasn't worth it anymore. Sources say the final offer from WWE wasn't insulting. But it wasn't exciting either. It was more of the same, comedy spots, 24/7 style chaos, limited in-ring work. A chance to stay visible, but never be taken seriously. That offer came with security. But not purpose. And for the first time in his career, Truth chose purpose. It's easy to say he should have stayed. He had a guaranteed deal, loyal fans, and an easy schedule. But maybe he didn't want easy anymore. Maybe he wanted meaning. You have to understand, walking away from WWE isn't just a job decision. It's a cultural shift. It's stepping away from the biggest stage in wrestling. The machine that creates superstars. The platform that gives you millions of eyes every week. Saying no to that means you're okay being invisible, for a while. It means you believe your name still carries weight. That you can rebuild your career outside the system. Very few wrestlers have done that successfully. But R-Truth might be one of the few who actually can. Because his value doesn't lie in wins. It lies in connection. And connection doesn't disappear when a contract ends. Let's look at the timing. By the time Truth was offered his new role, Triple H was fully in charge. The creative team was evolving. The vibe was shifting. But for certain stars, the same old boxes still applied. Comedy guys stayed comedy guys. And Truth was the king of that category. Maybe he wanted to be more. Maybe he asked for a different kind of role, something serious, something layered, and they said no. Maybe they told him, "You're best as comic relief." And that's when he realized they'd never see him differently. So, he made the decision for them. This wasn't about ego. It was about legacy. R-Truth is 52. He's closer to the end than the beginning. But he's also one of the few veterans who never truly got a run that reflected his value. Not as a nostalgia act. Not as a surprise Rumble entrant. But as a full-fledged character with something to say. And WWE wasn't going to give him that. Not now. Not ever. So, he walked. There's something powerful about that. Because wrestling is filled with people who overstay. Who takes the check? Who sit at catering because they're afraid to leave? Who wait for the creative team to remember they exist? But Truth didn't wait. He left before they could send him out with a loss. Before they could turn him into a joke one final time. Before they could book him into obscurity. He chose to protect his image, his dignity, and his worth. Think about that. How many performers in WWE history got to leave without being publicly humiliated, buried on TV, or mocked on commentary? Very few. Now, let's talk about the AEW angle. At the time of his departure, Truth hadn't signed with AEW. There were whispers. Teases. But no confirmation. Which makes his exit even more gutsy. He didn't leave WWE for something. He just left. Period. That kind of move takes confidence. It takes belief. It says, "I'll figure it out. But I won't stay where I'm not respected." And yet, the possibility of an AEW appearance lingers, and it's not just fantasy booking. AEW is the land of exiles. Jon Moxley. Bryan Danielson. Swerve Strickland. Christian Cage. Men who walked out of WWE's creative shadow and found new life in a different kind of spotlight. If Truth walks into AEW, even for a one-off, it will send a message. Not just to WWE. But to the locker room. To every performer who feels boxed in. Overlooked. Reduced to a gimmick they've outgrown. Truth's quiet no becomes a loud yes to something bigger. And that's what makes this so dangerous to WWE. Not because they lost a main eventer. But because they lost control of the narrative. Truth didn't trash them. He didn't expose anything. He didn't cut a promo on Instagram. He just left. And that's the one thing WWE can't spin. So why did R-Truth say no? Because after 2 decades of being the good soldier, the team player, the silent workhorse, he finally realized he didn't owe them anything. Not his legacy. Not his silence. Not his story. It's easy to forget that R-Truth is a real person. That behind the absurdity, the one-liners, the my bad punchlines and the non-stop dancing, there's Ron Killings, a man who fought his way out of a life stacked against him. Because WWE never wanted you to see that version of him. Not really. They packaged him as the happy-go-lucky veteran, the lovable clown, the guy who couldn't find the ring or pronounce the city right. And fans bought in. They loved it. Because he made it entertaining. But underneath that character was one of the most resilient, versatile, and underappreciated performers the business has ever seen. So let's stop laughing for a minute and start listening. Let's talk about the real R-Truth. Ron Killings was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. His early years weren't pretty. He grew up surrounded by poverty, crime, and a lack of direction. Wrestling wasn't his first goal, music was. Rap was his outlet. He recorded. He performed. And in some ways, that love of performing shaped everything that came later. But survival came first. He fell into the streets, got involved in dealing, and served time. That could have been the end of the story right there. But it wasn't. Because Ron Killings didn't accept that as his final chapter. He found pro wrestling. Or maybe it found him. At a time when the industry wasn't exactly opening doors for young black men without connections, he fought his way in. He paid dues. He trained. He showed up. He started small, really small. Regional circuits, tiny crowds, brutal payoffs. But his energy was undeniable. His charisma didn't need a microphone. You could feel it from the back of the room. You couldn't teach it. Eventually, he made it to WWE during the Attitude Era under the name K-Quick. But he was just a sidekick then. A footnote. He didn't last. He left, and in what would become a pattern throughout his life, he reinvented himself. TNA was the place that gave him a real shot. There, he didn't just wrestle, he led. He became a two-time NWA World Champion, breaking ground as one of the only black men to hold a major U.S. wrestling title. He wasn't comedy in TNA. He was serious. He had a voice. But WWE eventually came calling again. And when he returned, he brought everything with him, the lessons, the experience, the self-awareness. Only this time, WWE saw something different. They didn't want a world champion. They wanted charisma. They wanted comedy. They wanted someone who could make fans laugh during bad segments and keep the energy up during dead shows. And Truth gave them exactly that. He leaned in. He created a character that could survive anything. Wildly unpredictable, borderline nonsensical, and absolutely magnetic. The Little Jimmy era might have been silly on paper, but R-Truth made it work. He made fans feel something about a made-up invisible child. How many performers can do that? Then came the 24/7 title. A joke. A gimmick. A paper belt created to go viral and nothing else. But R-Truth didn't treat it like a joke. He turned it into the funniest, most consistently entertaining part of WWE television for over a year. He ran through airports, golf courses, weddings, and hotel lobbies. He got rolled up more times than anyone in wrestling history, and still got back up with a grin. He did it because he was a professional. But he also did it because WWE never offered him the chance to do more. Behind the scenes, R-Truth was respected by everyone. Younger talent looked up to him. Veterans knew they could trust him. Management knew he'd never complain. He was the guy they called when things needed to be fixed. And that's where the tragedy begins. Because WWE never pushed him as a serious competitor, not because he couldn't go, but because he made being funny look easy. And when you make it look easy, they forget how much work goes into it. The truth is, R-Truth never lost his edge. Even at 50, he could still move better than half the roster. He stayed in shape. He could cut promos. He could connect with a live crowd in a way most wrestlers only dream of. But WWE saw one thing, a guy who could get laughs without asking for anything in return. That's the trap of being good at what you do. You become the go-to. The crutch. The guy they don't push because they need you too much in the background. And Truth accepted that. For a long time. But behind the smiles, behind the catchphrases, there was always a deeper performer waiting for one chance to show who he really was. Not the comic relief. Not the silly veteran. The man. Maybe that's why he finally said no. Not because he was tired. But because he was tired of being underestimated. The wrestling industry doesn't always reward the real ones. It rewards the loud, the political, the controversial. Truth was none of those things. He was stable, humble, quietly excellent. And maybe that's why his story never got told the right way. Until now. Because when he refused WWE's final offer, he did more than walk away from a contract. He walked away from a persona they created for him, a mask he wore for too long. He stripped it off and stood there as Ron Killings. A man who survived the streets. Survived the business. Survived decades of disrespect. And still walked out on his own terms. Let's stop pretending R-Truth was just a joke. That his best moments were the punchlines. That he was only good for a laugh. Because the reality is, he was a foundation piece. A bridge between eras. A reminder that not every hero needs a title belt to be great. And now, maybe for the first time, he's in control of his own narrative. No more gimmicks. No more comedy crutches. Just truth. When Triple H took over creative from Vince McMahon in 2022, the narrative was clear: this was the dawn of a new WWE. Talent was excited. Fans were hopeful. The press jumped on the bandwagon. It was marketed as a regime change. A passing of the torch from the chaotic to the calculated. But here's the truth: what happened to R-Truth proves that not much has changed. At least, not where it counts. On the surface, Triple H's WWE feels different. There are longer matches. Storylines breathe. Wrestlers have their real names back. The product looks cleaner. But behind the scenes? In the quiet corners of decision-making, in the invisible power dynamics? The system remains intact. And in some ways, it's more efficient than ever. The handling of R-Truth is a perfect example. Because if you ask people who knew Truth, they'll tell you, he was never a problem. He never missed dates. Never brought heat. Never walked out. If loyalty matters, if professionalism counts, he should have been celebrated on his way out, not erased. But under Triple H's watch, the same old patterns played out. A star made a decision the company didn't like, and suddenly, that star no longer existed. This is where the image of Triple H as a wrestler's leader starts to crack. He may understand the ring better than Vince. He may value in-ring work more. But when it comes to control, narrative, branding, loyalty, he plays the same game. And he plays it well. When Truth turned down WWE's final offer, it wasn't just a business rejection. It was personal. Not just for Hunter the boss, but for Hunter the brand protector. WWE is an empire, and empires don't like when soldiers defect, especially quietly. What stings more than a public burial is a dignified exit. One where the company doesn't get to write your final line. That's what Truth did. And Triple H responded the way WWE always has, with silence and blackout. There's a phrase that's been whispered for years among wrestling insiders: Triple H plays chess, not checkers. It means he's deliberate. Strategic. Cold when he needs to be. It's how he survived the Attitude Era, won back his top spot, married into power, and then rebuilt his image as the savior of NXT. Everything he does with long-term vision. So, when R-Truth said no, it wasn't just rejection, it was disruption. It challenged the unspoken expectation that loyal soldiers fall in line, especially as they age. And Triple H doesn't like disruptions. You can see it in other cases too. When certain stars ask for their release, it's not granted. When others leave and speak out, they're edited out of video packages. Even in NXT, Hunter was known for building loyalty, but also for enforcing silence when that loyalty cracked. Ask yourself, why are some released stars praised publicly, while others are treated like ghosts? Why did William Regal get fanfare, while others, just as important, were cut and scrubbed? Because under this new regime, the rules are the same. The packaging is prettier. The speeches are cleaner. But the machine still protects itself first. What's more revealing is that Triple H didn't need to bury truth. He didn't need to fire back. He didn't need to respond publicly. Because the machine doesn't speak. It moves. Quietly. And when it erases you, it expects the fans to move on. But this time, fans didn't. R-Truth's vanishing act felt wrong. Too abrupt. Too final. And unlike others who left in controversy, Truth had goodwill. People liked him. They trusted him. And they noticed when he was gone. That reaction isn't just about Truth, it's about the crack in WWE's polished image. Because if they can ghost someone that beloved, that loyal, that consistent, then who's really safe? The deeper issue is perception. WWE under Triple H is supposed to be smarter, more talent-friendly, more modern. But what's happened shows that the instincts haven't changed. Control is still king. The message is still managed. And those who step out of line are still cut out of the frame. Triple H may wear a suit now, but the playbook is familiar. And in some ways, more dangerous. Because fans trust him more. Because talent feels more hopeful. And when the old games are played behind a new mask, it becomes harder to call out. Truth's erasure wasn't about money. Or airtime. It was about message. A reminder, fall in line. Stay where you're placed. Don't try to write your own ending. What's striking is that Truth didn't lash out. He didn't shoot on Twitter. He didn't go to podcasts or leak emails. He just left. That's what shook them. Because silence is powerful when it's unexpected. And when it comes from someone who always played the game, it reads as betrayal, even if it's just a man choosing peace. This raises bigger questions about the culture Triple H is building. Is it really more free? Or is it just better disguised? Are veterans being empowered or quietly filtered out if they don't fit the vision? The myth of a new era works as long as no one challenges the script. R-Truth challenged it, not by yelling, but by walking away. And Triple H responded the only way the system knows how, by slamming the door shut behind him. But the problem is, this wasn't just any door. This was the exit of a legend. And no amount of silence can erase that. Wrestling has a language that doesn't get written down. A code passed from locker room to locker room. You don't learn it from the contract. You don't learn it from training. You learn it in the silences between matches. In the glances backstage. In who gets picked, who gets punished, and who disappears. It's not just about doing your job. It's about knowing your place. For years, R-Truth knew the code better than almost anyone. He followed it to the letter. Show up early. Help the rookies. Never complain about your spot. Don't ask for too much. Be ready when called. Don't politic. Don't tweet out of line. Don't shoot in interviews. Take your losses with grace. Make your segments land. Stay loyal to the brand, even when it forgets you. And above all else, don't break the silence. In wrestling, silence is the currency of loyalty. You don't speak out unless you're done. And even then, you'd better have leverage. Because once you speak, the door rarely reopens. That's why Truth's choice was so radical. Not because he went on a rant. Not because he burned bridges. But because he did the one thing that really breaks the code, he said no, and he didn't explain. In this business, if you walk away without permission, you're labeled. Maybe not publicly. But internally. Quietly. The office talks. The locker room hears. Your name starts to shrink in importance. It doesn't matter how long you've been there. R-Truth was around for over 2 decades. He broke in when promos were real-time and botches went viral only through VHS. He worked through the ruthless aggression era, the PG era, the reality era, and still kept his character fresh. But when he left WWE without taking their version of an exit, the whispers began. People started asking, what happened? Why would Truth walk? And more importantly, why hasn't WWE said anything? That silence wasn't an oversight. It was a signal. Because in wrestling, not all punishments are written into storylines. Some happen behind closed doors. Some happen in the way people stop saying your name. In the way your face disappears from the website. In the way your friends stop posting photos with you. Out of fear, not disloyalty. There's a pecking order backstage. And not everyone wants to rock the boat. This code of silence protects the machine. Because once people start telling the truth about how the system actually works, who gets protected, who gets buried, how deals are really made, it all starts to crack. R-Truth didn't break the silence to the public. He broke it by walking without comment. And that alone was enough to turn the machine against him. Why? Because it sends a dangerous message. That even someone who played the game perfectly can still decide to stop playing. For a lot of guys in the locker room, that's a scary realization. It makes them think, if truth can walk, what's stopping me? And that's the last question WWE wants floating around. Because loyalty in this business is built on fear. Fear of missing TV time. Fear of losing your spot. Fear of being the next name they stop saying out loud. The unspoken rule is, loyalty means submission. Truth rejected that. Not with drama. Not with heat. But with clarity. He simply chose himself over the system. That's the real sin. In a world where wrestlers are told to trust the process, the idea of walking away from the machine and starting over is heresy. And it's not just WWE. The entire wrestling industry runs on codes. You protect the boys. You don't expose the work. You don't undercut a push. You don't step on a veteran's spot. And when the office comes calling, you pick up, even if you hate the script. Truth followed those rules for most of his career. But when it was his turn to take the veteran's paycheck and disappear into the background, he declined. Not because he wanted to make a statement. But because the statement was already made, I've given enough. I've done enough. And if this is all you see me as, I'll find somewhere else to stand. It's a move that shakes the system more than any promo ever could. Because for once, there wasn't a storyline. There wasn't a farewell match. There wasn't a heel turn. There was just an exit. And that's the part WWE couldn't control. Other wrestlers have left. Some have ranted. Some have broken NDAs. Some have sued. And WWE has always had a playbook for those moments. Issue a statement. Spin the story. Get ahead of it. But this time, there was no spin. Because there was no noise. Only silence. And silence is dangerous when it isn't owned by the company. The code of wrestling says you don't walk out on your own terms unless you've already been discarded. Truth flipped that. He walked out before they could. And that's why his exit has stuck. Why people keep asking about him. Why the name R-Truth feels heavier now that it's no longer being spoken on TV. Because he broke a rule no one talks about. He chose dignity without permission. And in wrestling, that's not just rare, it's revolutionary. Rumors in wrestling are like steel chairs. Cheap, loud, and often used for the wrong reasons. But they stick. Especially when silence creates a vacuum. And right now, nothing in wrestling is louder than the silence around R-Truth's exit. No statement from WWE. No farewell from fellow superstars. No final promo. Just, gone. Which is why speculation has taken over. So, let's walk through the theories, the whispers, the possibilities, the what-ifs, that are keeping fans glued to this story. Theory 1, the slam was real. One of the earliest and most persistent rumors is that Triple H literally slammed something when R-Truth turned down his final WWE offer. Some say it was a monitor. Others say a chair. Others say it was metaphorical. He slammed Truth's name off the booking board and told creative, he's done. It might sound dramatic. But if you know anything about the way WWE works, it's not that far-fetched. This wasn't a random talent. This was someone the office expected would stay in his lane, play his role, and eventually accept the transition to a background part. When he didn't, it shook the room. So, whether or not an actual object got broken that day, the emotional impact was the same. A door slammed. Hard. And it hasn't been reopened. Theory 2, the AEW deal was already in motion. Some believe R-Truth's exit wasn't just a reaction to WWE's offer, it was strategic. That he'd already been in quiet talks with AEW. That the moment he declined WWE's pitch, the move to Tony Khan's locker room was already underway. But here's the thing, if that were true, AEW probably would have made noise about it by now. AEW is loud when it wants to be. Big debuts. Surprise returns. Teases. If truth was locked in, there would have been breadcrumbs by now. Hints. Backstage sightings. Even a cryptic Instagram post. Instead? Silence. Which makes this theory interesting, not because it's confirmed, but because it suggests something deeper, that truth didn't leave WWE to go to AEW. He left WWE to be free. And that's a bigger story. Theory 3, he was offered something disrespectful. This one comes from people loosely tied to WWE's creative circle. According to a few anonymous sources, the role Truth was offered wasn't just a light schedule or a backstage comedy gig. It was something that felt more like a slow fade-out. Less camera time. Less visibility. No real matches. Basically, a permanent joke character used to prop up newer acts. If that's true, it changes everything. Because it means Truth didn't walk away from money, he walked away from being disrespected. From being used. From being someone's punchline instead of his own legacy. And that would explain why the response from WWE was so intense. Because if a veteran like R-Truth refuses a reduced role with grace and dignity, it forces the company to face a brutal truth of its own: they don't know how to handle men who say no quietly. Theory 4, the final straw was creative control. There's also talk that Truth wanted a say in his next character arc, more creative control, or at least a say in how he was used. Not a full rewrite. Not a push. Just some agency. And that didn't fly. Because WWE doesn't give that kind of input to everyone. A few stars have that power: Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, maybe a select few like Seth Rollins. But if you're not a headline act, your ideas are considered and usually shelved. If Truth asked for more control and was told no, that would explain a quiet, permanent split. He wasn't looking to take over. He was just looking to evolve. And WWE said, stay in your lane. He didn't. What if Truth had accepted the offer? Let's imagine the alternate timeline. He says yes. Accepts the role. Keeps appearing in backstage segments. Maybe returns to chasing the 24/7 title again if it's ever revived. Maybe becomes a backstage host for Raw. Maybe gets one feel-good legend moment every now and then. He retires on screen with a thank you video. Gets a Hall of Fame induction in 5 years. Smiles. Says he's grateful. Fades out quietly. On paper, it sounds perfect. But in reality? It's a slow erasure. R-Truth didn't want that version of his legacy. And honestly, who would? Because sometimes, the most rebellious act isn't yelling. It's walking away before the curtain drops. Before they rewrite you. What if he shows up in AEW tomorrow? Now let's jump timelines again. Imagine R-Truth debuts in AEW. No build-up. No promo. Just a shock appearance during a match. Maybe he saves Swerve from a beatdown. Maybe he cuts a serious promo for once. The internet explodes. Suddenly, all that silence gets flipped on its head. WWE's attempts to erase him backfire. Truth becomes the biggest talking point of the week. And AEW gets what they've always chased, momentum through symbolism. Because Truth wouldn't just be another ex-WWE guy in their ranks. He'd be something bigger, proof that even the system's most loyal soldier has limits. What if he never comes back to wrestling? This is the hardest timeline to accept. But it's possible. Truth fades out. No comeback. No AEW debut. No retirement speech. He lives his life. Makes music. Does appearances. Remains respected. But never laces the boots again. It sounds quiet. But it would also be historic in its own way. Because it would be the story of a man who gave everything to the business, and then left it on his own terms, without asking for anything back. That kind of peace is rare in wrestling. And maybe that's what Truth wanted all along. The bigger picture, what this means for the industry every time a major name leaves WWE and thrives elsewhere, it puts pressure on the system. Cody left and came back more powerful. Bryan left and reminded fans he was still elite. Moxley left and became the face of AEW's heart and soul. Truth's situation is different. He didn't leave a main event slot. He didn't burn the house down. He just walked away from being undervalued. And if he succeeds outside WWE, whether in AEW, music, acting, or just being himself, it tells others something powerful, that staying in the system isn't the only way to be remembered. That being respected doesn't always come with a Hall of Fame speech. That your worth isn't defined by how long you stay in one place. In a business that still thrives on control, those are dangerous ideas. And that's why R-Truth's exit has people talking, not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. Legacy is a word that gets thrown around too easily in wrestling. Sometimes it's based on title runs. Other times it's about how many main events you worked, how many stadiums you filled, or how many belts you held. But that's not legacy. That's resume. R-Truth's legacy isn't about stats. It's not about championships or 5-star matches. It's about presence. About consistency. About what he meant to the locker room and the fans when no one else was paying attention. You want to measure legacy? Start with this: R-Truth made people care about things they were supposed to laugh at and forget. Nobody was supposed to care about the 24/7 title. It was a prop. A distraction. A gimmick with no prestige. But R-Truth made it a phenomenon. Not by chasing wins, but by creating moments. He made fans feel something during matches that didn't matter. That's legacy. He made WWE programming watchable during the worst of the pandemic, when fans were watching empty arenas and morale was flatlined. His energy was unshaken. His creativity never dipped. He didn't need a crowd to be over, he just was. That's legacy. He carried storylines that were doomed from the start. He turned joke segments into cult classics. He danced down the ramp like every step mattered. And most importantly, he never mailed it in. That's legacy. And the irony? WWE never treated him like a legend. But the fans did. He became a legend without being labeled one. He was the people's MVP, quietly working every angle, every week, every year without asking for a damn thing in return. But now that he's gone, we have to ask. What happens to that legacy? If WWE won't acknowledge it, do fans keep it alive? If he never cuts a final promo or walks into a Hall of Fame spotlight, do we just let it fade? The answer should be no. Because R-Truth represents something too rare in this business to let go unnoticed. He represents the worker, the soul of wrestling. The person who doesn't need the main event to leave an impact. The guy who doesn't need a belt to be valuable. He's the example everyone points to when they say, "That's how you handle yourself in this business." And yet, the company that benefited most from him had no idea how to handle his departure. They could have honored him. They could have celebrated his loyalty, his longevity, his unique ability to do everything they asked. Instead, they tried to delete the story. But the thing about legacy is, you don't get to control it once it leaves the building. And Truth's legacy is now bigger than any one company. Let's talk about influence. Ask any young wrestler who's watched WWE in the last 20 years, and they'll tell you, R-Truth was a masterclass in adaptability. He showed you how to survive in a system that wasn't built for people like him. A black performer who wasn't pushed as a serious champion. A comedy act who never turned bitter. A veteran who stuck around not because he had to, but because he chose to. He outlasted eras. He outlasted regimes. And most importantly, he never lost who he was. That's influence. He taught people you could be different in this business and still be successful. You didn't have to fit the mold. You could be yourself and make that work. He carved out a space for charisma. For humor. For heart. In a business that too often rewards the cold, the corporate, the ruthless. And the fact that he did it without turning into a brand puppet makes his story even more important. He was a WWE guy. But he was never owned. He played their game, but he didn't sell his soul. And that's why his quiet exit lands so loud. Because it's a reminder that dignity matters more than spotlight. That knowing your worth sometimes means leaving before they remember to thank you. Let's imagine for a second that WWE brings him back. That they realize what they've lost. That they give him the Hall of Fame nod. Would it matter? Sure. The fans would love it. The speech would go viral. There'd be laughs, maybe a tear or two. But the truth is, it wouldn't change what happened. Because the legacy has already been written. It was written every time R-Truth made a crowd erupt with a throwaway line. Every time he brought life to a dead segment. Every time he pulled a segment back from the edge of cringe and made it something fans remembered for years. That's not something WWE can take back. And it's not something AEW, or any company, can replicate either. Because R-Truth's greatness wasn't about where he worked. It was about how he worked. And now, for the first time, he gets to decide where that legacy goes next. Maybe it's AEW. Maybe it's music. Maybe it's just peace. Maybe it's nothing more than being a father, a friend, a man without a microphone. Whatever it is, he's earned it. Because when the lights go down, and the ring gets torn down, and the fans go home, you're left with one question: did I do this my way? And for R-Truth, the answer is yes.